Today we're going to cover Merry Boys Part 1 of 2. This is basically a two-parter large floppy from Proper Comics and Karl Stephan, also known as Chubb. This is currently doing a second chance funding on FundMyComics if you're interested in getting that book. We're going to get through Part 1 now. Probably going to do Part 2 next week and keep going if there is interest in this book. First off, we're going to go through how this book came to be. It came through originally through an Indiegogo campaign, crowdfunded by Proper Comic and Karl Stephan. First campaign, which is the first part of what we're going to look at today, raised 15,224 British pounds or 25,812 Canadian dollars. Decent amount overall for a, unknown comic, let's face it. It's a brand new thing. The second campaign, to follow up, it's Merry Boys Beefheads, which is a larger book, but one large book rather than two smaller books, raised 18,303 British pounds, 31,000 Canadian on Indiegogo. And as I said, this is currently running second chance campaign on FundMyComic. And there's a package you can get that I asked for personally, actually, where you can get part 1 and 2 and Beefheads together in one package. Very, very good deal and extremely good service. Since the books are already printed, you get them shipped almost instantaneously. And it took me just a couple of days for me to receive those books after I ordered them. Very satisfied with that. Indiegogo, as usual, shadow banned that particular campaign. I don't know what their actual guidelines are, but I think if you put the words comics and gates anywhere near your campaign, you will not be promoted by Indiegogo. The author still did the rounds on YouTube, social media, the usual ways. I haven't seen any other marketing avenues for this particular book. I know FundMyComics did post about it a few times on their Twitter account recently for the second chance campaign, but I haven't seen any other major media appearances basically, or appearances on any of the shows I normally follow, basically. The campaigns were successful, but they do show one of the major issues with self-publishing indie comics right now. It's very hard to find the good from the bad, and especially when the platforms actively mess with you. FundMyComics is nice for that. They're really even-handed. Everybody gets a chance to shine more or less on their side. But even there, the fact that they are even-handed, the very good product is not going to always be at the top. It's going to be the latest one or newer ones or ones that are getting a lot of funding. Very meritocratic, but it could cause some issues. While if you go on Indiegogo and Kickstarter, well, they actively ate you, so there is that. One of the other issues we see is that most artists don't have the financial power and backing of an Ethan Van Sciver, an Eric July, to be able to do a strong campaign with built-in marketing, built-in distribution. They have to go through these other platforms, which is a problem in the long run, because not only does it benefits people that don't always share your ideals or your way of life, it also limits how you're interacting with your customers. It's not a bad thing. Okay, I'm never going to say that going to Indiegogo or FundMyComic or Kickstarter is a bad thing, because sometimes that's the only option you have. But I wish and I hope there are other options available in the future. Now we're going to go actually into the book and the details. So we are going to start with the characters as usual, with the Merry Boys, which are Ari, Chaz, Philip, and William. A bit different, each of them, but you can see that they share some features. They're born with a deformity which makes their head and their hands larger, their feet larger, and they are able to process alcohol basically like Popeye processes spinach. Maybe it's just because they haven't tried spinach yet and only tried alcohol. I'm not sure. The boys bring justice in the name of the Ugly Mother. As you can see, she's on the shirt there. She's in the splatter of blood here. She's in the burning smoke here. To the bad people of the city of Basham. They're armed with a cricket bat, stomping boots, and a very positive attitude in doing the good work. Very funny little characters overall. Interested to see where they are going personally. Their version of Splinter, basically, is Father Parrish, who's a slightly alcoholic Catholic priest, just a little bit, always drinking. He's legally their guardian, and we learned how that happened in book 2, so I'm not going to spoil it right now. He is a great speaker, even in an inebriated state, and he sees the moral turpitude of Basham as needing correction, which is why he is driving the boys to do what they do and giving instructions. And he's basically waiting for the Pope's blessing in order to move forward with his plans to rectify the situation in Basham. It's a thing that I hate to do, but this is one of those cases where the city of Basham is a character in this particular story. It's actually a character that's ongoing throughout all the stories in Merry Boys. It's something that I hate because it's pretentious and it sounds like some of the university teachers I had to deal with back in the days where the city was always a character. But here is the city that's falling to ruins. It's falling apart like many cities around the world. And this particular decrepitude of the city is reflected into everything we see in this story, more or less. Father Parrish blames that situation on Asbo, the 26 hours superstore, and the fact that the people turned their back on the most ollie institution of Britain, the pubs. As I said here, this might sound pretentious to say that this city is a character, but in this case it really is, because it is what drives the actions of all of our characters, the good, the bad, and, well, there's quite a few uglies in between there. And we're going to go through the story real quick. So our intrepid Quatuor is pinned down by a group of violent, quite likely drunk chavs. And how will they escape? Oh, wait. The boys are also drunk, and since alcohol does give them supernatural strength, they can easily just bash their way out of it. The boys recount the event of the previous night, where they beat up a few CutiesEnjoyers, a drug dealer, and served them his own medicine, burned down a sinful bakery, and helped an old woman cross the street. All normal things to do. There's something else that they've done and they just can't remember, but that's what we know at this point. As the cops come by to investigate what just happened to all the chavs, they escape by jumping from roof to roof back to the Church of St. Bart, where they're residing. And they go from the uptown to the downtown to the old town, and they keep going and going until it gets more and more decrepit, as it is in many modern cities around the world, unfortunately. So they reach the Church of St. Bartholomew, St. Bart, who is the patron saint of butchers, leather workers, twitching, neurological disease, and skin disease. I'm not sure if it's intentional on the part of Chubb. It is a bit of a funny patron to use for the church. I haven't asked the question. I could have, possibly, or maybe I'll know after this video is published. I did look up St. Bartholomew, a marcher and an apostle. One of those weird things once you start looking. He's also a patron of quite a few things, and Florentine cheese and salt merchants, because they need a patron saint, obviously. So the boys wake up their guardian from a restful sleep in a very safe place, as the public phone outside the church is ringing. Harry is a very good boy and willingly answers the phone, only to speak with His Holiness John Paul II. I really like that picture, personally. It is a great caricature of that Ollie man. After Harry speaks with His Holiness, Father Parrish asks if the answer is yay or nay, and Harry says it's yay or maybe nay. He's not too sure. And Father Parrish starts giving a sermon as to how people turned away from the most holy institution towards a giant multinational corporation, and that their fight should be against it before all else, even though they're probably some of the people who shop there the most. We'll see here when we talk about story elements a bit more of the themes and the ideas behind that, but it is a nice discussion to have. The book ends with the beginning of a flashback from Father Parrish to when Abso moved into Basham and the damage it caused to the community. And we also see just how bad it got, as someone tried to rob the church and shot Father Parrish over a bottle of liquor. This is a pretty tight story in this book. But like I said earlier, it's a large floppy. It's the same format as a European book in terms of the page format, but it does still have that feeling of an American floppy. And we see here it really ends with an art cliffhanger, which we'll follow with issues 2. Cover here is simple, but it gives us a good idea of the characters, obviously. You see the 4 boys right there. The work on the church in the background is simply fantastic. This is great background work overall. And this is the kind of cover that would attract people seeing it on a rack because it looks silly, but you also see that there's a high quality of work on it. So it's a very nice mix of the two things that you really need in a good cover. It is also centered around the characters. The fact that everything's in black and white and the words are in color. Those are all good elements here. We already talked about the book format, but once you look at the book itself, it's very high quality paper throughout the book, but the cover itself is the same paper quality as the interior. Even though it's a very, very good quality, laminated, top of the line here, I would have preferred either cardboard or cardstock for the cover. It would protect the book better in the long run, easier to store. I honestly do not like the paper covers that most places use, and it's probably my European background, I guess, but I really think having a decent cover quality keeps the book a lot better for a longer term and is better in the long run. Get no ads in the book, like most indie comics or things that go through Indiegogo. But there's 3 pages thanking the backers, which is always a very nice gesture and shows that the author does care about the people supporting him. And at the book end, we get a few pages of fan art, most of which is very good. And I've just posted a few here. Don't come into this book thinking this will be a regular American realism kind of thing or even a European realism kind of thing. We're looking at European caricature and comics. Something in the lines of Gottlieb and a few others of those in the 60s and 70s in Franco-Belgian comics, where you have that realism, but superposed to it is the just extreme caricature of various things. Our main characters are really nice, but I would have liked them to be a little bit more different from one another. It follows the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles style, where all the characters are more or less the same except for minor differences, but I do understand why modern depiction of the Turtles are all differentiated with additional things. I don't like how some of them are differentiated. It doesn't work for many of them. A different style, like the most recent ones we've seen with Seth Rogen, I really am not a fan. But the idea that the characters should be a little bit more differentiated than just by their weapons, or in this case, it's facial features, is not a bad idea. This is probably one of the weaker points in this particular book. Father Parrish is scary in a good way. He towers over his wards. He's double their size easily, but he also towers over them psychologically. The boys are teenagers, maybe young adults. They're not meant to be geniuses, while Father Parrish clearly has a very sharp mind, even though it's dulled by alcohol all the time. Let's not say just some of the time. Let's go with all the time. I love the look of St. John Paul II in this particular comic. Like I said, it's immediately recognizable. It looks good and it looks respectful of his character, which is weird in a comedy parody comic like this in a way, but it shows some good intention on the part of the author, in my opinion. The criminal elements are represented in extreme ways throughout this to show that they are morally decrepit. They are bad guys in more ways than one. This is a good, once again, a good range here where the caricatures fit very well with what's going on. The background work in this book is also phenomenal. I didn't think so at first, I'll be honest, because I was simply flipping through the book and reading the story, which is what I normally do the first time I look through a book. But as I looked through it second, third time to get the video going and get things going, it's beautiful how ugly it is. You feel the overwhelming depression of Basham looking at the streets and everything closing, the characters and how they're behaving on there. It's the constants of the graffitis on the walls everywhere. It's a beautiful and disgusting thing at the same time. Always fun to see this kind of background work. Panel work, however, it's functional. It's nothing I would call surprising, fantastic. It's workable. Nothing that I would write home about. Is it bad in any way? No, it's not boring. The page real estate is well used. Not going to go too much deeper into that. If we look at story elements, however, the first thing you need to know about, well, this entire series, don't expect any subtleties here. It's about as subtle as a cricket bat to the face. We're not supposed to have weird understanding here. Bad is bad, good is good, I guess. But even though there's things in between, our heroes are cleaning up the town, literally and figuratively, by doing their work. And it's a town that needs a lot of cleaning. The main villain here is moral decrepitude. That's what they're fighting against. And that's a very positive message for most modern writers. We don't notice this fall of moral as much as we should nowadays because it's ingrained into everything we have. And a lot of the books and a lot of the things we read are filled with moral decrepitude without us calling it out in many cases. This is extreme, obviously, and this is a view that it might be antiquated for some people, but it's not a bad thing to promote overall in the story. One of the main thing here is that men turned away from the holiest of all institutions, the pub. It's played off for a laugh here, obviously, but it's true that those British style pubs, it's one of those places where you connect with other people, where you unify with others and bring things together. And that's a thing modern cities and modern everything is lacking. We still have a few coffee shops here or there, but most coffee shops are still now branches of a larger corporation, or you go in, you get your coffee, you leave, and you go to work. It's not a place where you're going to sit down and talk to people. Sitting down and talking to people nowadays, a lot of it is done on the internet, obviously, in various chat rooms and discords and things like that. But I don't think it replaces this direct connection you had when you were drinking at a pub, drinking at a coffee shop, going to your local game store and trading cards with friends, going to your local comic shop and talking comics to people. This is a thing that doesn't exist as much anymore. And those centralized hubs of discussion and social connections being removed, I think is one of the cause of this moral decrepitude that we're living through. I'm not sure if that's the intent of the author here, but that is a way I read this particular story. Everything went to shit when Walmart moved in. That's a common thing in many communities, and it's a common trend in a lot of. I wouldn't know. I was going to say a lot of novels and books. Not super frequent because large corporations own a lot of the books, but it is a team in a lot of different things that underlies many things. We have a popular song here in Quebec from a band about that particular thing exactly. When the large superstore opened, it ruined the town. So it's not a thing that is individual to places in Britain or even in the US with the Walmart superstores destroying everything around them. You know, I'm not a fan of having the police as the bad guys or being poorly represented in comics. Here it's a caricature of the British bobbies. It's played for comedies. They're incompetent, they're corrupt. That's not unexpected. I mean, it's not something that I would go against directly in many stories, but I would like the police to be represented as good guys every once in a while. It's a sad statement to say that, but it is. This is half of a full story, but it's still doing very well in terms of pacing. The beginning of the book gives us our main characters, explain us what they can do very simply, and they show us what they can do really simply. There, we follow this up with the introduction of Father Parish and the overall main goal of our hero, which sounds silly at first, but when you realized from the art and everything that's around it what it actually did to Basham, you realize that this goal might be a bigger one. Finally, we are given the flashback, which will tie the two books together, ending with a strong cliffhanger. This is a very effective pacing. The jokes have time to breathe. The art has time to enter your brain and make you understand things. This is overall as good as it gets in terms of pacing for this form of book. Final thoughts. Well, there's a few things I'm going to think of here. Generally not a huge fan of edgy, mature humor. If you followed me or read me on a few Twitter posts and things like that. But this is the kind of book where I think it's well balanced. We're dealing with irony, sarcasm, and dead seriousness at the same time. Makes me happy, and this type of mature humor works in this particular thing, generally through the extreme violence. Not a huge fan of various sex jokes and things like that. It just irks me all the time when I see that because whenever I buy comic books, I always want to share them with my kids or share them with other people. Sometimes these make it a little bit more difficult to share overall. It's a great representation of the dregs of Britons. I mean, the bottom tier locations and the bottom tier characters which you meet. You don't see that in Hollywood all that often, even in big projects. This is the kind of story you'll have more often in smaller indie production or smaller local production where they're going to talk about the town of Asbestos as a case, where they show you just how bad this place is. It's interesting to see all the time. And as I was saying, the team of a big corporation destroy local business is not explored enough in modern cinema, modern books, modern comics. A lot of the big problem is that those big businesses are the one financing culture most of the time. So they don't want to be represented poorly. You have those odd documentaries that pop up, like there's a big one against Walmart, there's a few against Amazon, things like that, but those are always indie, very small, and very few people hear about them. And they're generally, like I said, documentaries. Fiction stories with this particular team are fairly rare until you get to Persona 4, where it's a central point in the game at the start and it doesn't matter afterwards. So it's a weird thing and a weird team that is not properly used very often. All right, so this covers this particular book. We're going to go through the next one, like I said, probably next week. I will see you guys later. I thank you very much for taking your time with me. Keep on reading comics, keep on enjoying them. I'll keep analyzing them, and I'll talk to you guys later.